Hello everyone, a very good morning and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep. Welcome to the Hindu News Analysis. So before we begin today's discussion, we have an important announcement. This Saturday, that is on the 30th of September at 6 p.m., we have a special workshop that has been scheduled. If any of you are working professionals who are preparing for the UPSC Civil Services Examination and you need a preparation strategy, then do attend this workshop without fail. The workshop will be conducted on the BYJU'S Exam Prep app, and all you have to do is register by using the link that would be provided in the description box of this video. I'm sure many working professionals face challenges in managing their time, in understanding what to read, what not to read, right? So attend this free workshop and trust me, all these doubts will be cleared, and this session would be conducted by Abhishek Mishra sir. So the workshop happens tomorrow at 6 p.m. So do register without fail. So with this, let's get started with the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper by first looking at the topics we're going to discuss. I have chosen 9 important articles for today's discussion. 4 articles require a detailed analysis, largely from a mains point of view. And we have 5 more articles that are relevant for the prelims exam. So let's cover all these articles one by one. But before we start, why don't you press the like button and do share the videos with other aspirants as well. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. So let's begin with the analysis by looking at the first article from the front page of the Delhi edition of the Hindu. Yesterday, India has suffered a very big loss. M.S. Swaminathan, a renowned agricultural scientist and the father of India's Green Revolution, has passed away following old age and illness, and this marks a huge loss for India. Every Indian should pay tribute to the man because it was his strategic vision, it was his idea, his thinking, his contribution that made India self-sufficient with regard to food security. Single-handedly, he has saved millions of lives, and he is recognized and renowned for this around the world, not just in India. So in this context, we should understand the contribution of M.S. Swaminathan. The topic itself is very important for Indian economy, right? So let's understand what role did M.S. Swaminathan play in the Green Revolution and what challenges was India facing and how did India overcome these challenges. So M.S. Swaminathan, who is regarded as the father of India's Green Revolution or the key architect of India's Green Revolution, right? He was a top agricultural scientist who would play a big role in India's agrarian policies back in the 1960s and 1970s. Post-independence, India was dealing with a very difficult period. India had multiple challenges. Along with all the political and security challenges, we had major economic challenges following independence. Because the colonial period had destroyed India's inherent strength. Traditional agriculture had been decimated by colonial exploitation. There were multiple back-to-back famines that had caused massive devastation in India. From 1940s to 1960s, in those 2 decades, India was hit by massive famines because of droughts, and millions of people had perished due to lack of food, due to hunger. So hunger and malnutrition was widely prevalent in the country, and India did not have food security. We were living a ship-to-mouth existence. Indians of this era were largely living a ship-to-mouth existence, meaning the essential food items were largely being imported from the outside. As India's agricultural productivity had been compromised due to the famine and the general neglect of agriculture, right? The soil had lost its fertility. We didn't have high productivity crops. We didn't have any scientific advances which had been introduced into our agriculture, right? There was no systematic irrigation provided through the government. There was no availability of fertilizers or pesticides, right? This was a direct result of colonial exploitation, And in these days, the government also was struggling to manage the food supply in the country. Under these dire circumstances, India had to rely on external food aid. We had to rely on other countries to provide food aid to India. Especially the United States played a major role in delivering food aid in the 1960s. Some of you might have heard about a wheat variety called PL480, which the US supplied to India. Millions of tons of wheat would be shipped from the US to India. Almost 10 million tons were being supplied in 1966. That's why it's called ship-to-mouth existence, meaning we weren't growing our own crops, right? We were dependent on outside supplies, on the aid of other countries. We didn't even have money to purchase that. We weren't importing the food supplies, rather we were taking this as aid from countries like United States. So this situation is not ideal for any country, right? Any country would desire to have self-sufficiency, at least with regard to food security, to tackle hunger and malnutrition. So under these challenging circumstances, it was MS Swaminathan and the then governments that played a critical role in transforming India's agriculture. Of course, MS Swaminathan was not alone. He is seen as the key architect, but of course it was a collaborative effort. But the vision of MS Swaminathan, the changes that he introduced into India's agriculture system, that is what made a very big difference back in the 60s and 70s. He collaborated with then agriculture ministers C. Subramaniam and Jagjeevan Ram, and during this period, several landmark changes were introduced in Indian agriculture. New crop varieties were introduced, new varieties of wheat and rice, which would increase agricultural productivity. They were introduced on a large scale. Irrigation was introduced, and other scientific methods of crop cultivation was streamlined into Indian agriculture, like usage of fertilizers, pesticides, scientific management of crops, right? So because of this comprehensive change in India's agricultural system, we registered a quantum jump in agricultural productivity. India's production of wheat and rice almost doubled within a few years, and this was because of the efforts that were undertaken during this period. So the entire idea, the vision behind it was driven by MS Swaminathan along with the government of India. Is that clear? So this is where you need to pay more attention to the contribution of MS Swaminathan. You need to understand what exactly was done. You might expect a question, a mains question, or even an essay topic on this. See, in 1940s, the Bengal famine had killed around 2 to 3 million people in India. It was a devastating famine, a massive disaster because of repeated drought seasons. Agriculture had collapsed, and there was also neglect because the colonial administration hardly bothered about Indian farmers and India's agriculture. So when the Bengal famine was devastating India, the British government committed grave blunders, and as a result of their policies, a man-made disaster took place. Even though the droughts were natural, the famine was natural, but it was British policies which made this a man-made disaster. The then British Prime Minister Winston Churchill was notorious for his policy during this period of time. His officials in India were advising that because of the famine, millions are going to get killed, and they had advised that enough food supplies had to be provided for Indians. But guess what Winston Churchill did? He ordered the food supplies to be diverted from hungry Indians to feed the British soldiers in various colonies who were part of the World War effort. This led to a human tragedy in India where 2 to 3 million people perished because of hunger and malnutrition. Is that clear? Today, Winston Churchill might be a celebrated figure in Europe and in UK, but his policies led only to horrors in India, large-scale human rights violations in India. So it was during this period that MS Swaminathan was inspired to play a bigger role in Indian agriculture. These devastating events pushed MS Swaminathan, and it served as a big motivation for him. Around the same time, the Quit India movement had begun under the leadership of Mahatma Gandhi, right? Parallelly, the Bengal famine took place, and especially Indian students, they were trying to see how they could contribute to India's freedom struggle and how they could play a role in India's growth and development once the country attained independence. And M.S. Swaminathan was one such young student in 1940s. So inspired by India's freedom struggle, inspired by the sufferings of the Indian people, M.S. Swaminathan swore and committed that he will dedicate his life to agriculture. He would become a civil servant and become a specialist agricultural scientist who would introduce key changes in India's agricultural system. He started his journey with his research on high-yielding variety of crops. The initial focus was to increase agricultural productivity, to come out with additional inputs which would increase agricultural productivity, to introduce fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides, promote efficient soil and water management, promote structured irrigation schemes, which would drive productivity in the agriculture sector. So along with these changes that were championed by M.S. Swaminathan, he focused heavily on the right genetic variations of wheat and rice, which would be suited for India's context. Since wheat and rice were the staple, right? His entire focus was on introducing high-yielding variety of plants that would increase the productivity, which could solve the food problem, the food challenge of India. So the colonial rule had devastated our agriculture, right? Our traditional subsistence agriculture had been devastated by the impact of colonial exploitation. So we were pushed to depend on food imports, to receive food aid from US and other countries. We were essentially leading a ship-to-mouth existence, right? So beginning from 1950s all the way till 1970s, during these 2 decades, M.S. Swaminathan played a very, very important role in introducing these changes in our agriculture system. Special attention was paid to agrarian states such as Punjab, Haryana and Uttar Pradesh, parts of western UP. Right? Punjab and Haryana, they already had decent irrigation, which was further scaled up due to the easy availability of water in this belt. Right? Punjab is drained by major rivers like Ravi, Beas and Satluj, part of the Indus Basin. India had taken up a few mega dam projects and irrigation and canal projects through which irrigation was delivered to the farmers in Punjab and Haryana, and this was experimented with in other parts of the country as well. So along with improved irrigation, the focus was on introducing the right fertilizers. The focus was on using the right pesticides, herbicides, and better soil and nutrient management so that farmers could register an immediate jump in productivity. But introducing high-yielding variety of seeds was the biggest challenge that was faced by M.S. Swaminathan. Because in that period, with limited technology, with limited resources, coming out with new variations of plants was a challenge in itself. Because this was very essential. In 1947, our wheat production was at around 6 million tons per year. By 1962, this had increased only to 10 million. But by 1966, there had been a steep drop because of the famine and the drought which had hit India again. So at this point, the changes that were brought about in our agriculture system led to the doubling, almost doubling of the output. Within few years, within around 4 years from 1964 to 1968, within the introduction of all these changes, we saw a doubling of India's wheat production from almost 10 million to 17 million tons. This quantum jump is what made India self-sufficient with regard to food grains. By mid-1970s, India became self-sufficient with regard to both wheat and rice. And this transformation in just 5 to 6 years was achieved because of the changes brought about by MS Swaminathan as part of India's Green Revolution. In these efforts, MS Swaminathan collaborated with a very popular agro-scientist, Norman Borlaug. You can see Norman Borlaug in this image over here, along with MS Swaminathan. These two agri-scientists would collaborate and they would transform agriculture in India and around the world. It's because of these efforts that Norman Borlaug was recognized with the Nobel Prize. Later, he won the Nobel Prize as well. So MS Swaminathan would directly collaborate with him to introduce a certain genetic variant of wheat, which led to this transformation in India's agriculture sector. See, the problem was, the moment you add fertilizers and provide better water supply, automatically productivity would start increasing. So MS Swaminathan noticed that be it rice or wheat, the moment fertilizers were added, the moment pesticides and other scientific methods were used along with better irrigation, there would be a jump in productivity. But problem was, the traditional varieties of plants in India, the traditional wheat and rice varieties in India, they were very tall and slender. The plant structure was such that it was very tall and slender. Now, if you have seen a standing wheat crop or rice crop, all the food grains, they accumulate at the top, right? You have the ear heads where all the food grains are accumulated. They're all at the top of the plant. So the moment the size increases, the weight increases at the top, the plant would collapse. It would fall flat on the ground, which is called lodging. If the plant falls on the ground because of the weight, the plant is not able to bear the weight, then your crop is going to fail. So this was the challenge to solve. Even though high yielding varieties were working with fertilizers and irrigation, problem was the Indian variety was not suited for this. The moment the food grains accumulated at the top, right, the weight increased at the top, the plant which was weak, which was tall and slender, would fall on the ground, leading to failure of the crop itself. So to solve the problem, a genetic variation had to be brought about. So MS Swaminathan initially experimented by using chemical and radiation methods to try to bring about DNA changes in the plant's genetic structure. But these efforts failed. It did not yield the desired results. The focus was to develop a dwarf variety of wheat, basically a shorter plant, bring about such genetic changes so that the plant's height can be curbed without affecting the yield. This was the focus of MS Swaminathan. The plants were falling to the ground because they were tall and slender. If the plant is short, if it's a dwarf variety with the same high productivity, then you have solved the basic problem. So the domestic efforts by MS Swaminathan did not yield the desired results. He tried experimenting with chemical and radiation technologies to bring about a genetic change, but that didn't work. Then he sought out the Norrin dwarf genes from abroad. Similar work was being carried out in the United States and also in Mexico. In the US, an agricultural scientist known as Orville Vogel had successfully developed a dwarf wheat variant called the Norrin 10. So MS Swaminathan approached him asking for assistance to help India achieve food self-sufficiency. Orville Vogel collaborated with MS Swaminathan, but problem was this variant, the American variant, was not suited for the Indian climatic conditions. Right? India being a tropical country, this variant, which was custom developed for the American setup, the American climatological conditions, wouldn't suit India's context. So Vogel suggested that there is another person in Mexico, there's another American scientist called Norman Borlaug, who's carrying out similar work in Mexico, and he believed that this dwarf wheat, the Norrin 10 variant, which had been custom developed for Mexico, he believed that this would be a better version for India. This would be more suited for India. So based on Vogel's recommendation, MS Swaminathan would meet and collaborate with Norman Borlaug and together they would bring about the dwarf wheat variant. This would be introduced in India that triggered the wheat revolution. As desired, the height of the plant was reduced successfully without affecting the yield. The fertilizers and the water, the nutrients, they had increased the yield, right? And the plant, now it was shorter and it solved the lodging problem. That is how India witnessed a wheat revolution within 4 to 5 years. From 1964 to 68-69, our wheat production had more than doubled. Similar success was seen with rice. And even before we could realize it, India had become self-sufficient with regard to food grains. So this is the remarkable transformation that India witnessed. And the credit largely goes to MS Swaminathan because it was his vision of introducing these inputs, these genetic variants, especially the Norin 10 variant, the dwarf wheat plant, which transformed India's agriculture. But however, just like any advancement, there will be side effects, there will be drawbacks. So with regard to Green Revolution, there have been some adverse consequences. And MS Swaminathan had predicted this. He had cautioned not to abuse fertilizers, pesticides and insecticides. He had urged the farmers, the governments to not over-rely on pesticides, insecticides and fertilizers because they're all chemical based. So they're not suitable for the environment. They could be harmful to the environment. So in the Punjab-Haryana belt, there was a massive overuse of fertilizers, pesticides, insecticides, herbicides. This polluted the soil and the water system. And even the excess usage of irrigation, the constant stagnating water in the agricultural fields has also contributed to high salinity. So there has been a negative impact. And there has been a regional divide as well because of the Green Revolution. Because Green Revolution largely benefited few states like Punjab, Haryana and parts of UP. Many other states, they never saw that kind of transformation. Since the focus was largely on these few states which had sufficient irrigation, these states and the farmers here, they prospered. But other states were left behind, giving rise to a regional divide with regard to development in the country. And the other problem was the environmental consequence. The overusage of irrigation causing high salinity in the agricultural fields, overusage of fertilizers and chemical-based insecticides, pesticides, which had a detrimental environmental impact, right? The overusage of groundwater as well, the depletion of groundwater table. All of this became the negative consequence of the Green Revolution. And MS Swaminathan had cautioned about these consequences, right? But that being said, MS Swaminathan's contribution was critical in saving millions of lives in India. Because without food self-sufficiency, India would have depended on food aid and imports. And every drought season, every famine season, we would have seen millions of people losing their lives. So this is the biggest contribution of MS Swaminathan to India. That is why he's such a revered figure. He's widely respected in India and around the world. And his passing away is a huge loss for the country and the world itself, right? So let's take this moment to pay tribute to the lost soul and just cherish his contributions, right? And of course, whatever we have learned is relevant directly for the exam as well. Now let's move on to the next article. Let's look at this editorial from page number 8 that deals with geriatric care. What is geriatric care? Geriatric care is about caring for older people, caring for the elderly, ensuring their health, ensuring that they live a life of dignity in their old age, right? This is what is known as geriatric care. Because old age people, senior citizens who are above the age of 60 years, they face numerous challenges, right? They suffer from various diseases, they're vulnerable to various health conditions, and they may not have economic stability because they won't be able to work anymore they don't have a stable income, right? So because of their health status, their economic status, old age people, they become a vulnerable section in the society. And protecting them, taking care of them is the responsibility of the society and of course the government as well. Right? It's one way of paying back to the elderly who have contributed to the society and the economy when they were young. Throughout their life, they would have contributed to raising their family, to contribute to our economy and society. So in old age, it's only the duty of the family, the society and the government to take care of the elderly. So this is the focus of the editorial. This editorial has been brought out in the context of the UN Population Fund report that we were discussing yesterday. If you remember yesterday's analysis, we discussed the UN Population Fund report on aging in India. We understood how India is going to witness a significant jump in aging population by the middle of the century and the end of the century. Right now, we might have demographic dividend. We might have a large proportion of young population which is contributing to India's economic rise. But in 2 decades, right, especially after 2036, till 2050, going all the way till the end of the century, we are going to witness a declining population, and we are also going to witness an aging population. Essentially, all of us would be in this bracket in a few decades, right? So, a large proportion of India's population would be in this category of senior citizens, right? As of now, and if you look at, let's say, 15, 20 years back, we always had a higher proportion of younger population compared to the older population. But this is going to change. The demography of India, the population structure is going to change, and we are going to have around 20.8% of our population by the middle of the century who will be above the age of 60 years. Almost 35 crore people, right? That is a very big number. Is that clear? As of now, India has around 15 crore senior citizens, which is 10.5% of our population. So this is going to double within the next 2.5 decades. This will increase to around 36% of our population by the end of the century. Nearly 36% of our population would be old age population by the end of the century. So given this fact, we need to start planning accordingly, because this is not just a social obligation, but it's also an economic challenge. It's a health crisis which is going to come up in the next few decades. So policy makers, the government, the society, the civil society should start planning for this, and appropriate initiatives have to be taken to care for the older population, right? There are countries that are dealing with this challenge already, like Japan, China, European countries. They all have an aging population, right? And they are focusing on geriatric care, because this not only has a huge economic impact, it will have a big societal impact. It will impact your health status. So caring for the elderly is a very important obligation of the government, right? In a way, it's a constitutional duty as well. Under directive principles of state policy in India, there is an article, that is Article 41. Article 41 of the Indian Constitution directs the government to provide assistance to old age people. Is that clear? So there is a DPSP in this regard, which urges the government to provide assistance to old age people. Based on that, we have several schemes and initiatives to care for old age people. I'm going to mention that later. But since the challenge is going to increase with doubling of our old age population, we need to scale up our efforts. We need to plan proactively. Because within the old age population, there is another challenge which will come up. The challenge is that most of the senior citizens will be women. This will create a unique challenge in itself. Because women have a higher life expectancy than men. Especially after the age of 60 years, women have a considerably higher life expectancy. In general, life expectancy has increased because of advances in medicine and healthcare. Right? Humans are living for more number of years. But women outnumber men when it comes to life expectancy. So your old age population in the age group of 60 to 80 years or even above that would largely comprise of women compared to men. Now, why is this a challenge? This is a challenge because in India, women are at a disadvantage in their younger age. When women are in their adulthood, right? They are not participating in the labor force. This is not their mistake, it's a societal mistake. The patriarchy in the society has prevented women from working. We have very low participation of women in the labor force. It's just 24%. 24% of our workforce is constituted by women, which means that women may not have economic and social security in old age. They may not be very independent. They may not have earned enough. At a point where you lose your family members, your friends, right? You become alone at a certain point. Such old women may not have economic and social security, which makes them all the more vulnerable. Is that clear? So understand in what context we are mentioning this. Of course, women play a very big role in the economy. But the point is, in a patriarchal society where women are discriminated, their social and economic well-being is already compromised in adulthood itself. So by the time they reach old age, they are even more vulnerable because they don't have income stability, they don't have economic social security. That at a point where they would have lost their family members, their friends, their immediate circle, right? Chances are high that most of the old age people would be alone. At this point, they face a very critical risk, which makes them more vulnerable. And the other challenge we are going to face is that there are interstate variations which might come up. The challenge could be different from state to state. For example, we have noticed that in states like Kerala and West Bengal, single old age parents, their proportion has increased significantly because most of their children have gone outside to look for better opportunities. This happens in every state, but the percentage is much higher in Kerala and West Bengal, where parents are left to themselves, sometimes single parents, right? Or just the old age couple are left behind while children have moved out to other cities or maybe abroad. So there may not be anyone to care for them. So this, along with the population difference between Indian states. If you look at South Indian states like Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, and others, they have achieved population reduction. So the share of elderly population would be higher in the South Indian states compared to the national average. But other states like UP and Bihar, where fertility rates are still very high, where they haven't managed to bring down fertility levels, they will have a lower percentage than the national average. So these interstate variations will also create challenges in policy making, right? How will you address this in a humane manner? How will you address this in the best possible manner to provide the best possible geriatric care for the old age people? That would become a major policy challenge. The elderly may not have their own source of income. Not every family would have saved enough. They may not have enough savings. They may not be getting pensions. They may not have a family to take care of them, right? So that is where the challenge comes up, and the proportion of such population is going to be more in rural areas. The burden will be much higher in the rural areas, thus increasing the vulnerability of the old age community. Is that clear? So this is what India should prepare for. So editorial is suggesting that we should adopt a whole of society approach. This can't be dealt with just by the government. This has to be dealt with by the families and by the society itself. A societal approach is needed to ensure the physical, mental health, the security of the old age population, which means our healthcare systems have to improve. Healthcare schemes and initiatives have to be launched to provide the quality healthcare for old age people and ensure that they live a life of dignity in their last few remaining years. Provide them with adequate shelter, food, nutrition. Provide them opportunities where they can engage with the society, where they don't feel isolated. Address mental health issues, because as you age, as you become more isolated, mental health issues are going to increase, from depression to anxiety, etc. Right? These issues have to be tackled along with life-threatening diseases and critical terminal diseases. So this requires a specialized intervention from the government with the entire society together, from the healthcare industry, from NGOs, right, and the families and the society itself. That's why it requires a whole of society approach. So as of now, under the obligations of Article 41, the Government of India has launched a very important policy, the National Policy on Older Persons, launched in 1999. We also have the Maintenance and Welfare of Parents and Senior Citizens Act of 2007 that provides for the care of the elderly population. But this alone is not enough. Given that the population is going to double within a few years, right policies and laws have to be brought in place, right schemes, welfare schemes have to be initiated to provide for all-round care for the old age population. Is that clear? So that is the focus of the editorial, and it's a very important topic under governance and also under social issues. Now moving on to the next article, on page number 8, we have a column that is connected with governance and healthcare. The topic deals with kidney transplant, or in general organ donation, but specifically it's focused on kidney transplant. See, a lot of people suffer from chronic kidney disease, which is often a result of diabetes, poor lifestyle, hypertension, and other lifestyle related conditions along with other disease factors. So chronic kidney disease condition can disrupt one's life. It may not be immediately life-threatening, right? Because even without a kidney or without both kidneys, you can still survive. There are options available for dialysis, but still, the malfunction of kidneys, where kidney replacement becomes necessary, right, is a major healthcare challenge that is facing the Indian population right now. In India right now, there are more than 2 lakh people waiting for kidney transplant. But out of them, hardly around 3.4% of them are able to get kidney donors. Because kidney transplants, right, for patients suffering from chronic kidney diseases, it is entirely dependent on organ donors. For the transplantation to be carried out, of course, you need a healthy kidney from a donor. But out of the number of patients who are waiting, hardly 3.4% are able to get donors. Every year, just around 7,500 surgeries happen in India. All right, this is a major issue. It's a healthcare issue. The problem is not with lack of medical facilities, lack of technology. The technology needed, the healthcare facilities needed, they're all available. The infrastructure is there. Problem is with the laws and regulations that govern organ donation. The laws and regulations governing kidney donation is very complex in India, which has created a roadblock for linking the donor with the patient. That is the focus of the article here. The writer says, see, if you have to get a kidney donor, let's say there is a patient suffering from chronic kidney disease and kidneys have to be replaced. That's the only option available. That's the best way in which the person can lead a normal life. Or else the patient will have to rely permanently on dialysis and other painful methods which disrupts one's life completely. But if you undergo organ transplant, if you get a kidney transplant done, you can almost resume your normal life. But to get kidney donors, there are 2 types of donors who could be available. One, you can get it from a diseased person or a brain dead person. Let's say a healthy individual has unfortunately passed away due to an accident or due to some condition, right? And if the organs are healthy enough and if they have signed up for organ donation, if the person has already signed up for organ donation, or if the immediate family agrees to it, right, that is when organ donation can happen. The other possibility is where near relatives and friends can donate. In the immediate circle of the patient, a donor can step up, maybe in the immediate family, right? Let's say the father, mother, son and daughter, husband and wife. So they can donate, or even close immediate friends can also donate. But donation is dependent on matching of the blood type and the tissue type. It's not that any kidney can be used for any patient. The organ tissue type and the blood type has to match, or else it will be rejected by the body. It will lead to severe complications later. So achieving this match is very complicated, given that the number of donors are very less and you don't have a proper centralized national database to look for donors, right? Within the available pool of donors, achieving a blood type match and organ tissue type match is very, very difficult for the patients. So here there are some innovative methods available to further scale up kidney donation, because in other countries they've already implemented the successful models. For example, if you look at US, Spain, Netherlands, even France, UK, Germany, they all have a solid system in place where they encourage kidney swap and formation of a kidney chain. These are innovative methods of ensuring that enough kidney donors are available in the market for the required patients. In kidney swap, basically two families which are looking for kidneys, let's say the family members are ready to donate to their family members. Problem is the blood type and organ type is not matching. In that case, if there is a cross match, the two families can exchange the kidneys. Let's say there is patient A and patient B. Patient A's father is ready to donate. Problem is the kidney is not matching, the blood type is not matching. Patient B's son is ready to donate, but it's not matching. And miraculously, from this family, the kidney of the son, right, in patient B's family, matches with patient A and vice versa. In such cases, kidney can be swapped. Both the families can come together, swap the kidneys to both the patients, so both patients get a kidney transplant. But to make this happen, you need a system in place. You need a centralized national database to connect such patients to provide for kidney swap to take place. Kidney chain is where an altruistic donor who wants to donate out of goodwill. Let's say there is a person, he wants to contribute to the society, he wants to help people suffering from such conditions. So as an act of selflessness, as an altruistic act, he wants to donate his kidney, right? So this person donates a kidney, he doesn't expect anything in return. He doesn't want money, he doesn't want another kidney in replacement. He's simply donating his kidney to help a patient. Just out of goodwill, out of a good heart, he's helping someone else. Now this can form a chain. From that family, another member can donate, right? You create a chain of donation. So these are two innovative methods of kidney donations which have been successfully implemented in foreign countries. But in India, the model is not working. These models cannot work because of very stringent laws and regulations. See, government is cautious here because, yes, there is a possibility of organ donors being exploited. I hope you know that there is already a big black market where poor people are exploited, and there is a entire criminal nexus here. You have a criminal cartel, right, that controls the organ donation industry. There's an entire black market that operates here. So it's largely poor people who are exploited for their organs. So to keep a curb on these illegal practices and to prevent organ trafficking, India has some very stringent laws in place. The laws vary from state to state as well. But these regulations are so strict, it ends up harming genuine donations as well. And that is the concern of the writer. For example, in states like Kerala, altruistic donation is illegal. Tomorrow, if you try to donate kidney out of goodwill, you cannot do that in Kerala. It's illegal, it's banned. You just out of goodwill, you can't. There are many states where kidney transplant can be done only within the family. That is, the donor has to be an immediate relative or a friend. If let's say there is a non-relative or a friend donor, such donations are not acceptable. They are seen as illegal in certain states. There is no centralized database to link the patients with the donors to establish kidney swap and kidney chains. So this is the problem the writer is highlighting. We can simplify the laws and regulations. We can draw lessons from other countries which have already successfully implemented these models. See, in India, we have the Transplantation of Human Organs and Tissues Act of 1994. Under this, a set of regulations have been brought out. You have the Transplantation of Human Organs and Tissues rules. So swap transplants are allowed, but only if it's within near relatives. That's only within near families, immediate families, swap is allowed. Between two disconnected families, swaps are not allowed. Altruistic donation is illegal in many states, and there is no centralized database to connect the donors with the patients. So these are the challenges which is affecting kidney transplant in the country. That is why there is such a big deficit, and only few patients, hardly 3.4% of our patients, are able to get a transplant. Is that clear? So this is the key issue which the writer is highlighting, and these are changes that can be brought out to simplify our laws and regulations. So now moving on to the fourth article, on page number 10, we have an important article related to science and technology and as well as internal security. It's connected to the topic of cybersecurity and science and technology as well. It deals with cookies. Cookies that you all come across on your web browsers, on various websites. I'm sure the moment you log into any website, right, you get a pop-up saying that, do you accept all the cookies? Or certain cookies have been blocked, right? So what are these cookies? What do they do? What is its exact role? That is something we should understand, because there is some concern related to cookies. In the digital world, cookie of course is not a biscuit, right? So cookies, they actually play a very big role in improving your online experience. As a user who is logging into websites using the internet, your experience becomes much better because of cookies. Cookie is basically it's a piece of code. It's a piece of code that is embedded into the browser through various websites. And what they do is essentially, they keep a track of your online behavior and activities. For example, your user ID and password that you're entering. Let's say you log into Facebook or Google or Amazon, right? You enter your user ID and password, you get a pop-up asking whether it has to be saved, whether you want to save your user ID and password. This is a cookie. It's a cookie which is tracking your activity and keeping a log of your user ID and password. This is one way in which cookies are improving your experience. So next time when you visit the same website, you don't have to re-enter your user ID and password. Is that clear? Similarly, cookies can track your likes and dislikes. It can keep a track of your address, your location, your name, your age, right? You don't have to re-enter all the details again and again. Certain selections can be preloaded. It simplifies it, makes it more convenient, right? Simplifies your user experience and makes it more convenient to access the internet and browse through various websites. So on e-commerce platform, shopping websites, your experience is much more seamless because cookies have already tracked your behavior. They know what you like, what you don't like. And accordingly, targeted ads, your preferred products can be displayed upfront. By understanding your behavior and activities, the correct products and the right advertisements can be displayed, which will actually help the user. There are many advantages from cookies. And cookies also transmit analytics data. For the developer, it relays analytics data back to them to understand how the platform is functioning, if there are any bugs, right? If any rectifications has to be done. So analytics data is relayed back by cookies as well to the developer. So it does play a very big role, a positive role in improving user experience. But however, there is a big concern here. Since it is involved in tracking your behavior and activity, it is responsible for personalization of the user experience. There is a risk of this data getting compromised. Your private data is definitely being collected. Now the question is this with your consent? Is your consent obtained before cookies are embedded into your browser by various websites, and before they collect data, before they track your behavior and activity, are they taking your consent? That is a big question. Even after taking your consent, the data that they are collecting, storing and processing, the question is it safe? Because obviously there are privacy concerns, data security concerns. Because cyber criminals can access the cookies. They can hack into browsers. And if they get hold of the cookies, it will reveal your personal information. Your user ID, passwords, your online behavior could be revealed to cyber criminals, to the attacker, who could then use this to cause financial loss or blackmail the target. Correct? So this raises questions of cybersecurity as well, and data privacy and data security. So that is why there are concerns regarding how cookies are used, how they are deployed. So data protection laws around the world, they look to regulate cookies as well. In European Union, you have a data protection law called the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regime. So EU's GDPR regulates cookies as well. Just like it regulates all forms of personal data, even cookies are regulated. Even the Digital Personal Data Protection Act that was recently enacted in India. Finally, India has got a data protection law. Just a few weeks back, the Parliament has enacted the Digital Personal Data Protection Act. This act also mandates explicit consent to be obtained before collecting and processing user data through cookies. So cookies are also brought under the regulation of this act. So the companies are responsible to be transparent regarding how the cookies are being used, what kind of activity is being monitored, what kind of data is being collected, and ensure that there is well-informed consent before collecting and processing your data. So this is one way through which your data privacy, data security concerns can be addressed, right? So this is something you should know about cookies and the advantages of cookies, how it helps your user experience, and what concerns are associated with it. So this completes my detailed discussion of all the big articles in today's newspaper. Now let's proceed to the prelims section. We have few small articles, but they are very important, very relevant for your prelims. Let's look at this article from page number 4. This article refers to a primitive language called the Toto language. The Toto language, it's spoken by a very small section of people. The Toto language, it is spoken along the India-Bhutan border. Towards the northern parts of West Bengal, where West Bengal shares a boundary with Bhutan. This is where you find a tribal community, an indigenous community called the Toto community. They speak this language called the Toto language, which is a Sino-Tibetan language. It is linked with Chinese and the Tibetan language family tree. Is that clear? Its origin is connected with the Sino-Tibetan language family. Now, this is a critically endangered language. Please remember this point. It is recognized by UNESCO. The UNESCO has recognized Toto language as a critically endangered language because it is spoken by very, very few people. Hardly around 1,500 people can speak this language and understand this language. It's a language which is on the brink of extinction. Is that clear? So, to further protect this language and help its revival, a dictionary has been developed by a popular scholar and a professor, the Toto Shabd Sangraha. basically a dictionary has been developed to help in translating the language. Because right now Toto language has no script. It has no script of its own, although attempts have been made to create its own script. Right now Toto does not have its own script. So the Bengali script is being used. Toto speakers, they use Bengali script itself. So translation becomes very important, especially to convert it into English and other languages. So a top professor and scholar from the University of Calcutta has brought out a dictionary, the Toto Shabd Sangraha, as an attempt to protect this language which is on the brink of extinction. Alright, so these are some key points you should note down. It's given the status of critically endangered language by UNESCO. It is spoken by the Toto community along the borders of West Bengal and Bhutan. And it does not have its own script, it uses the Bengali script. Next, on page number 9, the Hindu carries a beautiful image of the Safdarjung Tomb in Delhi. I'm sure many of you would have seen this historical monument. The monument depicts a key part of Indian history. Safdarjung Tomb has been built in honor of Safdarjung or Mirza Mukim Abdul Mansur Khan, who was the Nawab of Oudh. He was the Viceroy or the Nawab of Oudh under the Mughals. Is that clear? It was built in 1754. Please make a note of the year. It was built in 1754. So this complex that you can see here, it's a garden tomb. It's considered as one of the last garden tombs of the Mughal era. And it consists of sandstone marble mausoleum. It's built with sandstone and marbles. And it has these 8 rooms around which there is a main chamber under a very majestic dome consisting of arched red, brown and white colored structures. It's quite similar to the Humayun tomb, the Taj Mahal in its overall architecture and design. But however, there is one key difference. The difference is that this tomb, which has a garden complex as well, it was not built for the emperor or the king. It was built by the Nawab, by a viceroy for himself. So what does this indicate? It indicates that the Mughal Empire was on the decline. This was the first time that outside of the immediate family, the royal family, someone else was building a tomb in their own name. All the previous tombs that were built, all such garden tombs and complexes that were built, they were all for Mughal emperors, their immediate family members, for the royal family. For the first time, someone outside the royal family was building a tomb for himself. And this was Safdarjung. This signifies the weakening power of the Mughals, the decline of Mughals which had begun by late 1700s. Alright? Next, on page number 12, we have an article that refers to the Indo-Pacific Army Chiefs Conference. The Indo-Pacific Army Chiefs Conference. This conference was hosted by India along with United States. India and US, which are two major Indo-Pacific powers, have jointly hosted this conference that brings the army chiefs of several Indo-Pacific countries together. This conference has been hosted since 1999. It was started in 1999 and it's a biennial event which is held once in 2 years. Around 30 major countries from Indo-Pacific come together, the respective army chiefs. They come together to hold this dialogue to discuss all the security issues of the Indo-Pacific. They talk about maritime security, they discuss counter-terrorism, humanitarian assistance, disaster relief, right? All these issues are discussed. And this time, India was hosting the conference along with the United States. Is that clear? So, article is referring to a discussion between the chiefs of the Indian Army and the French Army, where they have exchanged lessons from the Ukraine war. They've also discussed areas of collaboration in the Indo-Pacific, because France is a major Indo-Pacific power. I don't know if you know this, France has many overseas territories across the Indo-Pacific. Is that clear? So please take a small exercise, take up a small assignment. Identify few French territories in the Indo-Pacific. There are many small islands across Indo-Pacific that is still belonging to France. France still has sovereignty over them. So identify some of these islands and mention the names of these islands in your comment section. Let's see how many of you can get this right. Next, we have an article in the economy section that refers to current account deficit, which has increased from quarter to quarter. Compared to last quarter's data, the CAD or current account deficit has widened. So it signifies that our imports have increased, but exports have declined. Now, how can we draw the inference? This is based on the understanding of CAD. What is CAD or current account deficit? In general, in broad terms, current account deficit is when the value of the country's import of goods and services is greater than its exports. On the current account, where the trade in goods and services is measured, if your imports are much higher than your exports, you will register a deficit. That's the current account deficit, right? It also takes into account the export of services, the net revenue arising out of services, including the export and import of services. It also takes into account the remittances, the flow of remittances. This combined with your trade balance, which is the difference between your imports and exports of goods, this collectively forms your CAD, your current account deficit. Is that clear? So your overall export and import of services, the net revenue arising from this, the difference between your import and export of goods, that is your trade balance, your balance of payments, and your remittances, the money which your diaspora is sending back, or the money which is being sent out of India, right? Inward and outward remittances, collectively. This is your CAD, your current account deficit. Is that clear? It's a very important indicator along with fiscal deficit. These two are very important macroeconomic indicators that indicate the health of the economy. So right now our current account deficit has widened because imports have sustained, it has increased. Exports have shrunk, they have declined. And revenue from services and remittances has been stable. So that is why the deficit has widened. And it clearly points out that there is a trade imbalance in our foreign trade. Now coming to the last article, in the online edition of the Hindu, you have this page number 2 that deals with science and technology topics. After the sports section, you find this particular page. So here there is a very important article referring to monoclonal antibodies. I want you guys to understand what are monoclonal antibodies. It's in news because after the Nipah outbreak in Kerala, India has reached out to Australia to procure a monoclonal antibody known as M102.4. To deal with such outbreaks, to contain such diseases and treat those patients, India has reached out to Australia to procure something called as monoclonal antibodies. Monoclonal antibody treatment was used during COVID-19 pandemic as well to treat the patients. So what are monoclonal antibodies? That is what you should understand. See, these are essentially proteins which are synthesized in a lab. These are man-made protein structures, laboratory-made protein structures that can mimic the behavior of your antibodies in your immune system. Now, what does the antibody do in your immune system? It attaches to the antigen, to the foreign substance, which is a disease-causing substance, and it tries to eliminate the foreign antigen. That's how your immune system fights back against diseases, right? The antibodies released from your immune system naturally, it attaches and targets the antigen, the foreign body, which is a disease-causing particle, tries to eliminate it, flush it out from your body. These functions are mimicked by monoclonal antibodies. It's a protein structure produced in a lab, and when injected to a patient suffering from a disease, it acts like an antibody. It identifies the antigen, attaches to it, and tries to target the antigens. And thus it could be a treatment line, a line of treatment to deal with patients who are infected with diseases. These antibodies were developed by Dr. Christopher Broder in the United States. at the University of Health Sciences in Bethesda in US. That is where monoclonal antibodies were first developed. And M102.4, it's a very potent full human monoclonal antibody that can target Hendra and Nipah virus. Hendra and Nipah virus can be very effectively tackled by M102.4. These monoclonal antibodies have already received the initial approvals in clinical trials. Phase 1 clinical trials have been cleared, and they can play a big role in containing the spread of such diseases like Hendra and Nipah. Is that clear? So with this, I complete my discussion of the Hindu newspaper for today. Please take up these questions for your answer writing practice. I hope you guys write an answer, submit the answer in the answer writing portal, for which link is provided in the description box below. Also, head to our Telegram channel because we have a quiz on these topics, and the link for Telegram channel also is added in the description box below. So I hope you guys liked the session today. Do let me know how it went. Press the like button, share your comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. So that is it. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.